Welcome to the God is Not an Asshole podcast. If you are one of the many people done with religious dogmatism, hang on. You might sense transcendence, but your church or other faith community never seem to get off the ground. You realize that honoring your conscience means more than fitting in and keeping hard-to-explain rules? Hang on. You could probably think of the goodness in your tradition, and you tried your best to save that baby, but there's so much bathwater. Join your hosts, David Norman Moore Jr. in California and Carrie Connolly in New Jersey, who are collaborating to bring on guests who have found life on the other side of fundamentalism. Guests with stories of how they have liberated themselves from beliefs that divide us from each other. None of our guests' narratives are identical, but we hope you'll find something in common with each of them. We invite you to experience our common bond as we all inspire even more of us to embrace the true self.
Well, hello, everybody. Carrie is not here with me today. She has a family matter, an emergency that she has had to attend to, and she regrets not being able to be here with our guests today, Philip Farah and Alex Awad. They are Palestinians. They are Christians. Well, maybe some people don't know that that's a thing, but we are delighted to be able to talk with each other. Just as we got to meet each other, I have found fascination in their stories. Philip was just telling me that when he was detained by the Israelis, he was there with a couple of the Israeli Black Panthers. And Alex, he can't live. He doesn't have citizenship in the country in which he was born. He was born in Jerusalem, as was Philip, and in 1967, when 67 is married, right
after the 6-Day War.
After the 6-Day War, he was not allowed to return to his homeland, and this is really the ethos of everything we're talking about these days. I mean, what is happening in Gaza is happening around the world, in both hemispheres and every society, it seems. We talk about various calamities, whether they are Haiti, whether they are the Congo, wherever they may be, but they're all related in various ways. And so that's why Gaza is such a big part of our conversations, because it has to do with our humanity and our global politics. So I don't know who to bring on first, but these are amazing stories. And I just hope that, how about Philip? Let me just say that Philip has addressed audiences across the U.S. and the Middle East. And he's blogged for the Huffington Post, and that's Philip. And Alex Awad has written a couple of books. The first one is Through the Eyes of Victims, and the other is Palestinian Memories. And both of these books reveal the realities of life under Israeli military occupation. You know, I think we could probably talk for hours, and you would be compelling for our listeners. But go ahead and in this moment, what's happening right now, would you interpret for us what is happening in Gaza? Either
Alex,
one of you.
What? You want me to start, Philip?
Please.
Well, I mean, what is happening in Gaza is very, very much a genocide. It's a crime against humanity in a massive way, when 35,000 Palestinians are killed within 6 months, and when nearly 800,000 people are injured, when all the universities and the hospitals are destroyed, when most of the infrastructure of Gaza is destroyed purposefully, when about 1.6 million people in Gaza are now refugees in the city of Rafah, and the city also are threatened by invasion by the Israelis. This is what's happening. This is a crime against humanity. And it's really an awful situation. It's worse than anything that happened in the Middle East, even worse than what happened in 1948 or 1967 to the Palestinian people. More people have been killed and injured than any of the previous wars between Israel and the Palestinians.
Alex, where do you see this going? What is the intent?
Well, the intent from the Israeli side is to really expel the people from Gaza. They don't want them there. You know, the Israelis begged the United States government to ask the Jordanians and the Egyptians to accept the Gazans into their countries. But the Egyptian government and the Jordanian government said, no way, we will not accept refugees from Gaza. So Israel pushed them into one city, Rafah. Egypt refused them, Jordan refused them, and they are there now under the threat of Israeli attack. What is
Well, let me ask this, because I know I'm not the only one wondering. Two things: should Jordan and Egypt take responsibility for this, and if they should, why aren't they doing it?
Well, there are two sides to this question, and one side is the humanitarian. Some people they look at it from a humanitarian perspective and say, "Oh, Egypt should take them, Jordan should take them, so that they can go to hospitals, they can go to find food, shelter, so on and so forth." So that's the humanitarian perspective. But from a political perspective for the Palestinians, this is a disaster because in 1948, I myself also, my family, we became refugees. We lost our homes. We lost everything that we had and became refugees. We were never allowed to return back to our homes. So from a political perspective, this is a fear that if Palestinians go to Jordan, go to Egypt, that will be the end of the story. And Gaza will be taken over by the Israelis and resettled by the Israelis. And there will be no more Palestinian Gaza. That is the political problem that we are looking at.
So how does it feel, for lack of a better term for framing this, how does it feel to not be able to go home?
It's emotionally devastating. I mean, when I was, like I told you before the program, when I was in Switzerland in college and I finished college and wanted to go back home, and the Israelis, said, no way, you are not allowed to enter the country anymore. And also the country where I was, Switzerland, they didn't want me. I felt like a man without a country because the whole world was shut. I couldn't stay where I was. I couldn't go back home. Of course, I thank God because I got a scholarship to come to a college in the United States. But the feeling at that time was horrible to know that you are not wanted in your own country, and you are not wanted in the country where you are residing.
Let me ask, and Philip, you can weigh in too. But I have not had the feeling. I don't know what it's like to be separated from home in my own lifetime. You know, as an African American, there's always this longing for the roots in Africa, but I don't know the feeling of having been displaced. And I'm wondering, Alex, if how do I want to ask this? Because I think many in our audience, most of the people in our audience will not have had the experience of being displaced like that. Let me ask, how does it feel when now it took a genocide for your voices to be amplified the way that they're starting to be amplified now?
I can go. I mean, this really isn't new, although it is now genocide on steroids. In 48, the world knew what was happening. The United Nations observers, journalists were reporting in real time about the massacres, the many, many massacres that were perpetrated against the Palestinians in order to drive them out of their homeland, including, my family and Alex's family. Alex's father, I don't know if he mentioned this today, was shot by Israelis.
Coming.
But we actually...
Alex's father was shot by the
That's right.
Israelis? What shot and
Right.
killed?
Yeah, I'll come back to this. Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Go ahead.
I don't want to steal your thunder, Alex.
No.
There was reporting on this in real time, and Israeli historians have now completely validated the Palestinian story, the Palestinian narrative, that Israel had to conduct ethnic cleansing. Otherwise, it couldn't have been a Jewish state, because even in the area where Israel became a state in 1948, the Palestinians would have been a majority had there not been the ethnic cleansing. And ethnic cleansing doesn't happen in thin air. It has to happen after great, great violence. But this is what we're seeing now, except, today it's, like Alex said, far, far more severe. And it's not only the 35,000 who have been recorded, confirmed deaths through bombing and through firepower, the overwhelming superiority of Israeli firepower against the defenseless population. It's also the many thousands who are under the rubble. I have relatives who died because of lack of medicine, elderly relatives who are actually not in bad health, but they did not have access to their medicines. And
yeah, I can imagine that. I mean, I take a couple of meds that, I'm not under any threat of death or, imminent mortality. But if I went long enough without them, who knows the
right.
effects of
So,
that.
my relative, for example, Philip Jahshan, who is a Palestinian Christian like myself, taking refuge in one of the two churches in Gaza that now have almost the entire Gaza Christian community. They are sheltering there. His mother was in fairly good health, but she needed some medicines and she passed away. Every day I hear stories of relatives of mine who are facing similar conditions, and they are relatively lucky because, the churches, have provided them with some modicum of clean water, although it's still, scarce. Canned food, which, and even that is rationed severely, and no medicines. So, every day there have been cases like this. And in the church where Philip Jahshan, my relative, is sheltering, 2 women were shot by snipers, elderly women, shot inside the church, inside the compound of the church by snipers. Now, when a sniper shoots an 80-year-old woman, he knows exactly who he is shooting. Another relative of mine, Ilham Farah, survived the bombing of St. Porphyrius Hospital, where 18 Palestinian Christians were killed. She survived that bombing. Because it was a traumatic experience, she went to the other church, the Church of the Holy Family, to take refuge there. After 2 months, she walked to her house just to take a shower. Everybody was telling her, don't do that. By the way, Alex knows her. She was a stubborn woman. Thank God for them, because they are strong women. And she did not listen. Which was not wise. As she was walking to her house, a 84-year-old woman a music teacher beloved by many generations of her students in Gaza. She was shot by a sniper. Again, if a sniper shoots you, you're coming out of a church, they know exactly who they're shooting. The message is very clear that there is absolutely no person, no place, no shelter that is safe in Palestine. Not the churches, not the hospitals. You heard about the hospital, probably the whole world heard about a hospital where a mass grave of over 400 people were killed. Some of them with their hands tied, clearly shot in cold blood. Some of them still with IVs hooked to their bodies, taken out of the hospital and shot. So, the world is watching all of this. Our leaders, our political leaders here in this country, not only know what's happening, but they are providing the bombs, the 2,000-pound bombs that are causing this death and destruction.
So, Philip, what is impeding their conscience?
I don't think anything is impeding their conscience. It's a cash register. It really is a cash register. I mean, the more bombs they are sent, the more the lobbies that keep them in power benefit. The stock of the military industrial complex companies are rising, and rising thanks to the bombs that they are sending. There's no conscience in this. What conscience is there? And the same with the police departments in this country that oppress people of color, minorities, and who are in cahoots with Israelis. They get their training from Israeli.
Say something about that. I know our own local here in Santa Barbara, our own local sheriff was trained by the IDF. Can you say something more about that?
Maybe Alex knows. All over the country.
I mean, I was in Atlanta, Georgia, teaching a course at Emory University. And I learned then, that was before the pandemic, and I learned then, in Atlanta, that the Atlanta police were going on missions to Israel to be trained by the Israelis on, riot control and so on. But now what we have seen in the last week, especially at Emory University, where I taught a course, we have seen that the American police are using the tactics of the Israelis. What the Israelis have used on Palestinians, now they are using it on the American people who are peacefully protesting the genocide in Gaza. This is becoming like a fascist country. It's like the Hitler and the Nazis, when people are demonstrating peacefully and the police comes with brutality and try to squash their demonstrations. It is very sad, not only for Palestinians, but also for Americans.
Well, it is. I think it's very true. It's heartbreaking for all of us. I know as an African American, when I look at the coverage and see that there are Black police officers doing, what the Israelis are doing to Palestinians, but they're doing it to college students, teenagers. They're almost children, and they're abusing them. I wondered at the same time. I feel, ashamed, really, apologetic probably is a better word, because I was somewhat aware, but my sense of alarm was not as clear as it should have been. I should have been more vocal. I'm talking about over the past 30, 40 years. I should have made more noise, but I didn't. And I know as Palestinians, you were unheard. And now abruptly, people are coming out of the fog, I would say. So I wanted to ask you, what is that like to have been suppressed all of this time? And finally, at last, it takes this great tragedy to give elevation to your voice.
If I may, it's very similar to the situation of the African American, of blacks in South Africa. The world just was not listening. And by the way, the apartheid regime in South Africa and Israel were the closest of friends. When the rest of the world was imposing sanctions on Israel, the Israelis stepped in and they would buy the helicopters, the attack helicopters from Western companies and sell them to sell them to South Africa. But, racism was really at the heart of this. In South Africa, the whites did not see themselves as part of that continent. They saw themselves as something superior, and they thought, well, the whites in the Western world, the only people who count. Everybody else does not count. The whites in Europe and the whites in America are the only ones who count. They make some noises, but they really won't do any harm to us, to the apartheid regime. When students, of course, it started with African American pastors. I was part of the movement. Many of us were part.
You're talking about that led to the end of apartheid.
Exactly. The movement started with African American pastors, with students. It went to the colleges, marginalized people. But as it got stronger and went to the mainline white churches, gradually it became stronger and stronger, forced Congress to come in line, to fall in line. And Reagan and Thatcher came kicking and screaming and finally saw the light that this cannot go on and imposed sanctions. That's when the the apartheid system collapsed. We're seeing exactly the same thing now. The racism that Israel does not see itself as part of the region. They see themselves as part of a superior white society, although actually over 50% of Israelis are people of color. And by the way, they are treated as second-class citizens. We can go back to this. But they saw themselves. They still see themselves as superior to their neighbors. As long as they do that, there won't be peace. You have to be totally insane to think that what Israel is doing is going to bring security to Israeli Jews. It is really an act of love on our behalf in the US, an act of love to tell them you're driving drunk and you have to wake up and change your ways, because you have to live in this neighborhood forever. You're going to live in this neighborhood. If you want to live in this neighborhood, you have to treat your neighbors with decency. So, they're driving drunk and it is our job to take away the keys. Instead, our administration is sending more bombs.
It sounds like you're talking with the spirit of Dr. King as you say these things. You refuse to hate, and yet you are abused. Your people are abused. It makes me think of what happened in 2020 in this country when George Floyd was murdered by the police. And for some reason, that was the example to the world to say, oh, they've been trying to tell us. They've been trying to tell us, for generations. And now we get it. And I think what's happening to Gaza right now is similar to that wake-up call, would you say?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And the sooner the world hears that, the sooner the Biden administration gets the message, the better for the people who are still, even today, are being bombed and killed and maimed in Gaza. So, I wish we could talk this as if it was in the past, as if a ceasefire took place and as if now we have the peace. But no, this is continuing now. And that's why I urge everybody who is listening to this to continue advocating, continue to struggle, continue to speak up until there is a ceasefire and until the people of Gaza can have a day without bombs falling on them.
I'm thinking of, when I was a teenager, there were protests on college campuses around the U.S. and other places as well regarding the Vietnam War. And it was the students that really initiated the change that was needed. But maybe you can help me understand. Students were resisted by the police and the National Guard, things like that on the college campuses. But the difference right now, it seems to me, is they are being countered not just by law enforcement, but by other students, by Zionist students. I don't think there was a corollary so much to that when I was young and the students encountered the police. So now, can you express what the dynamic there? They're facing the weaponized police, but they're also facing the ideologically weaponized Zionist students.
I'm actually more optimistic than this. Back then, I was at the American University of Beirut, and we were very involved in the anti-war movement because we had American junior year abroad students who, they were going to be going to Vietnam, and they were resisting that. They were resisting the war also for moral and ethical reasons. I know, in fact, that some of the leaders of the 68 Columbia uprising, and back then also there were students who were kind of on the side of law and order. I really think that, the Democratic Party is really losing its base. They're losing workers' unions. They're losing African-American pastors and others, African-American and, civil society organizations. They're losing even young Jews, who are very much involved in the protest. Many of them are saying, not in our name. We don't buy this anymore. We are saying a genocide. And, if we say never again about the Holocaust, we should be saying. So I really think that the movement and the genie is out of the bottle. And, the conscience of the students is going to, in fact, it already has gone to the churches, to even white mainline, denominations like the Presbyterians and the United Church of Christ that have divested their pension funds from companies that profit from the occupation, like Caterpillar, Hewlett Packard, et cetera. I really think that I'm despite the horrors that we are seeing, the unspeakable horrors that we are seeing, I see positive signs. Unfortunately, it had to take, like you said, this genocide. But I really think the genie is out of the bottle, and Americans are sending a message. Civil society is sending a message, not in our name. And hopefully, as we grow the movement, and I'm optimistic, the leadership will be forced to see the light reluctantly, as Reagan and Thatcher reluctantly had to sign on to sanctions against apartheid South Africa. And again, I really think it's an act of love, for even if you don't care about the Palestinians, if you care about the safety of Jews, it's insane to think that it's going to bring security to them.
Well, Alex, can you say something about the rise in anti-Semitism around all of this?
Well, first of all, I want to say anti-Semitism is an evil that we totally go against. We condemn anti-Semitism in any form. But protesting a genocide is not anti-Semitism. Protesting Israeli crimes in the West Bank is not anti-Semitism. Protesting the pogroms that are happening in many villages and towns in the West Bank is not anti-Semitism. You know, asking for the world to give Palestinians a state and their rights, that's not anti-Semitism. So it is a big mistake when so many journalists or TV channels or politicians conflate anti-Semitism with, the call for Palestinian rights. I went to one of the encampments. Last week, I was in Charlotte, North Carolina, and I was invited to the university there. And I saw these students, with signs, carrying signs, ceasefire or end the war in Gaza or free Palestine. You know what I noticed? They were all very peaceful. They were all doing the right thing. Totally peaceful. So they asked me to give them a pep talk, and they all sat on the grass. They gave me a chair. I sat on the chair, and I gave them a pep talk. But none of them were anti-Semitic. None of them were having slogans, anything against the Jewish people. They are against the occupation. They are against the war.
Yeah.
I told them, you are on the right side of history. And those people who are opposing you or criticizing you and try to kick you out of here, they are on the wrong side of history. And it was really a great thing to see all of these young college students standing in solidarity with Palestine. But I'm also delighted to see that this movement is growing all over the United States and spilling over to England now and other European countries. The whole world is standing with Palestine. So this is the silver lining that I see at the end of this dark cloud.
So Alex, you tell us about your father.
Well, I was born in Jerusalem 2 years before the first Arab-Israeli war. So I was born in 1946. The war took place in 1948. We were living in West Jerusalem. I believe this is also the neighborhood of Philip. Philip was born very close to where I was born in West Jerusalem.
You two are cousins, that first cousins.
As a matter of fact, we went to the same school in Jerusalem. Yeah, so we must be related. I know we are related one way or another. Yeah, but anyway, and that gives me an honor, Philip, to be related to you. Thank you. But anyway, in 1948, in the first Arab-Israeli war, our neighborhood was attacked by Jewish militia, the Haganah, and they pushed up.
Your neighborhood was attacked by a militia. Now, I just want that to sink in for a moment. Let me cross. Your neighborhood was attacked by a militia. I mean, I can't even imagine that.
Yes. They are Jewish militia who believe that we should not live in Palestine and that they have the right to live in Palestine, but not us.
Okay, so this militia, who authorizes the militia?
They are a militia under a party called the Haganah. Haganah party, it's a radical Jewish extremist, I would say terrorist party. It's a terrorist Jewish party that decided to, in their opinion, to cleanse Palestine from Palestinians. So they pushed all of the Christians, like my family, and all the Muslims out of the neighborhood. Push them out. My family, my mother and father have 7 children. It was hard just to move with 7 children and go somewhere else. So we hesitated. We were late in going out. My father was going to work one morning, and he was shot and killed by a Haganah sniper. And so we buried my father around the house. And then not only we lost the father, but we realized that we have to flee from West Jerusalem to East Jerusalem. And so my mother took us in the middle of the night with, pajamas and whatever clothes we can put on, and we have to run away from our home in West Jerusalem to East Jerusalem. The sad thing about it, this is happening right now to many, 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 many thousands of families in Gaza. That's why, we lived the nightmare in 1948, but we live it again today, and many innocent people are suffering today. So we went to West Jerusalem. My mother found a work in a hospital. She raised 7 children. Thank God
East Jerusalem.
to East Jerusalem. Thank God we survived, and so now we are advocating for Palestinian rights. It wasn't easy. It was tough. We have to go to orphanages and boarding schools until we were able to stand on our feet. So our life was really miserable, but by God's grace, we are still alive.
Now, Alex, you referred to this particular party that the militia was affiliated with as a terrorist organization.
There were several Jewish terrorist organizations.
So it's interesting for me to hear this, because I have come to regard the Israeli government as a terrorist organization. And it sounds like, there's a history, because if they couldn't dissuade those militias, then what good are they for humanity?
Well, these militias, they became the foundation of the Israeli army. They became the Israeli army today that is terrorizing the people of Gaza and so on. So yes, I agree with you. The Israeli army is the biggest terrorist in the world today. And
in the world,
yes, in the world today. No.
See, that needs to be uplifted. That reality needs to be uplifted, because I will say, Alex and Philip, that I have found that people often are waking up, definitely, but it seems like there's been a lot of sleepwalking around me when it comes to, now I will say it's changing, because now it seems like every conversation eventually ends up about Gaza. But the thing is there was a time when you had to push to get the conversation to go there. Now it flows in that direction. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah. And
may I elaborate on the neighborhood that Alex described? Our neighborhood, I call it our neighborhood, but it was really our parents' neighborhood. I was born 4 years after the Nakba, now 48. It was called Musrara, it's still called Musrara. And it was mostly middle-class Palestinian neighborhood with Christians mostly and Muslims mostly, and a few Jews. And then it was attacked, like Alex said, in the project of ethnic cleansing, without which Israel would have not become a majority Jewish state. Had there, not been ethnic cleansing, then the Palestinians would have been a majority, even in the area that Israel took over. But anyway, so that neighborhood was middle class. And then it was ethnically cleansed in 48. My family and Alex's family were driven out by force. And guess what? Now it became the neighborhood that is on the seam, on the border. Because it became on the border, it became, even though it was middle class and pretty, nice houses, which were completely emptied of their population, right? Everybody fled, forcibly driven by the Haganah and other terrorist Jewish organizations. Now it was no longer a desirable neighborhood because it was right on the border. And so guess what? The white European Jews did not want to live there. And they placed dark-skinned Jews from Arab countries, mostly Morocco, to live in that neighborhood. And in fact, that neighborhood got some of its utilities from the east side that became Jordanian. So now they were cut off from some utilities. So that's another reason that it became undesirable, besides being, on a militarized border. So the Moroccan Jews were placed there. Many of them came from middle-class families in Morocco, but they were brown-skinned, darker-skinned people. When they came to Israel, they were sprayed with DDT, with DDT to delice them, They're placed in this undesirable neighborhood. They have no jobs, many of them, because the white European Jews were favored. Eventually, that neighborhood was the source of the Pantarim Shahurin. That's where the Pantarim Shahurin, the Black Panthers of Israel, was formed, established to, protest the treatment of Jews from Arab countries and other dark-skinned Jews by the Israeli government. Racism is at the heart of all of this. You mentioned African American policemen who treat people with cruelty, treat Black protesters with cruelty. You have this similar situation, in other colonial situations where people who were a little bit better off, than the oppressed, now see themselves as vested in oppression. Frantz Fanon wrote about this in Algeria, the European workers who were treated badly, many of them, by the way, from southern Europe, also somewhat, looked a lot more like Arabs, treated badly, but they, were oppressors towards the Muslims and the majority Arab population in Algeria. So you have this horrible situation where there were many darker-skinned Jews are part of the oppressive regime, but that is not true of all of them. Many wake up and say, we are also second-class citizens, and we have, to join hands. They're a minority, but they see themselves, that they need to struggle to create a better world for themselves as well as their neighbors. Some of them are identifying with Palestinians.
I think what you're touching on is, I think, one of the things that it helps to inspire your African American pastors, as you mentioned, at least the ones who are paying attention. I was one of the 1,000 signers to the document that calling for a ceasefire that was in the New York Times a couple of months ago. But what you're saying is the kind of thing that inspires people of color, I think, around the world, because we're watching the fragmentation, the stress fractures in white supremacy and Western supremacy before our very eyes. It's falling apart, and some people think that that's a bad thing. They truly believe that humanity's best interests are vested in capitalism and white supremacy, when in fact there's another world that awaits us, that basically is in the hands of indigenous people. And I read a couple of days ago how the reason that the Israelis are that it's not their homeland is because indigenous people never destroy their own land. They never destroy their own homeland. And so you're watching an alien force essentially destroy your homeland, and yet you continue to have hope. Can you say a little bit more about the hope that you have?
Well, I'm a Christian minister. Again, for so long in my churches, I always talked about having faith in God, having hope in God. And really, this is what keeps me going. we can lose a lot of stuff, but if we lose hope, we lose everything, you know. And so I see hope when uh, like, I was at this United Methodist convention in Charlotte. Almost everybody there was pro-Palestinian. Everybody. This
Mm.
never happened. Philip and I were in these conventions before the pandemic, and we had the struggle try to convince people of our point of view. Right now,
Yes.
the people come to me sometimes with tears in their eyes and tell me how much they are now in solidarity with the Palestinian people. So things are changing in America, and that gives me a lot of hope. The people in the United States, starting with the young people, but also seeping to the middle-aged people and the adults, they are changing their position, not because we are eloquent, not because we can speak a lot, but because of what the Israelis are doing, what people are
Mm.
seeing on their TV screens or from their smartphones and so on. The news that they are getting from Gaza is turning their minds and hearts upside down. So that gives me hope, because there is still humanity who cares, still see humanity that sees what's happening in Gaza and say this is wrong. It should not be, and we should not be supporting it. So yeah, I am hopeful because uh, first I believe in God, I believe in His mercy, but I also believe in human dignity, and
Yeah.
lots of people have that dignity, whether they believe in God or not.
Now, see, this is where what you're saying now reminds me, inspires me to recognize the role that faith has in all of this. Because if we didn't have faith, uh, y- we're up against some pretty powerful forces, but none of them more powerful than the faith, the God of our faith.
Yeah,
Because,
really.
when I still today, if I happen to, and I don't watch them very much at all, but if I turn on to a major news network and they're covering what actually is happening in Gaza, I'm still surprised, because they dragged their feet for so long that the only news we got was on social media, and maybe a little bit from the Guardian, but even the Guardian was guarded about this.
Yeah.
And so, Al Jazeera has been helpful, and a few others, independent organizations. So when I see the coverage happening on mainstream media, I'm thinking, oh, things are changing, because they're having to admit that they were wrong, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And
I
there,
really believe. Go ahead, Alex,
I
please.
just wanted to say, yesterday I saw an interview on CNN with Michael Moore, and it was just amazing. He was addressing um, Joe Biden, what we call Genocide Joe, and
Mm-hmm.
he was telling Biden what he should do in order to win the election, and that if he continues the way he is doing with his policy in the Middle East, he is going to lose the election to Trump. And he was really upset with Biden, because how can you do this and let us have Trump again as a president?
Mm. Wow. I would listen to Michael Moore if I were running for an office. Yeah.
I just want to say that Americans have a huge, huge role, can have an enormous impact, because, the more hope that you give to the nonviolent struggle of the Palestinians through boycott, divestment, and sanctions, peaceful methods, of jolting the Israelis to see that they are driving drunk. The more hope you give to the Palestinians that, you're growing, you're supporting their nonviolent movement, the less chance it is that an eye for an eye would make us all blind. Because, the violence that Israel is perpetrating against our people, the massacres daily, several massacres of Palestinians in different neighborhoods, that without hope will breed nothing but violence. So, for the safety of everybody, in the Holy Land. If we give hope to the Palestinians in a non-violent path, then we can avert this inevitability of, an eye for an eye will leave all of us blind. And there's nobody who can do it more than Americans, because, they are the only people that Israel, now it's civil society. There's nobody that Israel will listen to more than Americans. And as we grow our movement here, I think we can grow hope and possibly avert an even worse bloodbath for everybody.
Yeah, I appreciate your confidence, your sense for the possible. It reminds me of South Africa again, when yes, it required years of struggle, but the struggle was always infused by hope, especially with people like Desmond Tutu and his leadership and other clergy, African Enterprise and organizations such as that. But the three of us, here we are people who lead lives under the influence of Jesus, the message of Jesus. But at the same time, how much do you think that we need to address the historic anti-Arab and anti-Muslim enculturation in the United States in order for us to move forward?
It is really right now, it is addressed. It is addressed on social media, and it's addressed on YouTube. It's addressed on podcasts like this one, where people like Philip and myself are free to talk and express our mind and our hearts without limitations. So when I am looking at YouTube's, I see one speaker after another speaker after another speaker after another speaker, and they are all against the genocide in Gaza. And hardly ever we hear of, defenders of Israel. And if they come along, their arguments are so stupid, so out of line with reality. So I think that movement is happening, and I hope it will seep into the mainline media, where it will be ridiculous anymore to call Palestinians terrorists and to call the Israeli army as the most moral army in the world.
Oh my goodness!
But that's what we've been listening to for so long. But
we call that the okie doke.
Yeah, it's oxymoron, to call them the most moral army in the world. But I think the movement now is happening in the United States, and I don't think we'll go back to things as normal. I think we will continue to progress, and I believe Palestine will be free.
Yes. And, I think yourselves as Palestinians saying that is important for those of us who are not Palestinians. We need to hear you say that. We need to feel your confidence and your hope. We have hosted in the same way as we've heard from you. We've hosted anti-Zionist Jews on our podcast, and we need to hear from them as well. We need all of our voices braided together, and so I just have to thank you. Is there anything before we conclude today? Is there anything that either of you? You have the floor, you have the microphone, and what you would like to say to the world.
Alex, go ahead.
Well, first of all, David, I want to thank you for this opportunity you gave us. And what I desire is that the people who are listening to us will be motivated to double on their advocacy, double on, if they are writers, double on their writing. If they are screamers, double on the screaming. whatever they are doing to stand with freedom and justice, double that, because we need every voice. We need every person out there to start working to end the genocide and end the pogroms in the West Bank. I believe it could happen, but let us all work together towards that goal.
Philip?
Well, I've said it before, please try to remember that, even if you strongly care about the security of Jews in Israel, if your friend is driving drunk, the right thing is to take away the keys. It is really an act of love to do so for the good of everybody. And, please learn more. Go and talk to the students, interact with them, write your congressman and tell him, we don't think that this is the lesser of two evils. We're not going to vote for you because we think you're the lesser of two evils, because there can be no greater evil than what Israel is doing. What greater evil is there, If you continue to support the sending of bombs, we're not going to vote for you. And, this message is beginning to be heard. Some politicians are waking up. Some politicians have always been with us, like Ocasio-Cortez and many others. Ilhan Omar and many others. The others need to hear this. Please go and learn, talk to the students, learn from Jewish Voice for Peace, websites like Jewish Voice for Peace, websites like the United Methodist Kairos Response. There are many, many good sources.
Well, I have to say that there are people that I have voted for who eventually disappointed me, I will say. When the rubber meets the road, you find out where someone truly stands, and it's it's disappointing. It's painful sometimes especially if you know any of these people, if you've had conversations with them, and you have a sense of camaraderie, a sense of mutual purpose, but then they come down against the people of Palestine. It's very painful. So those are the people that maybe we need to really push. As you were saying, Philip, we need to call even more. And, there's a demonstration this week in front of our congressman's office, Salud Carbajal, here in Southern California. And I know this is happening all over the country. So I just hope that people who listen to this will take your words and put them into action. Thank you so much, both of you. May your lives be filled with abundance and more love and favor and opportunities to speak up.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for being here today. We are people who have left behind performance-based religion and the shame that comes with it. Maybe you have a personal liberation story to tell, and we want to know about it. Please contact us on Twitter at God is not an asshole, or text 805-703-8393, because the world needs to know that God is not an asshole.